Today's episode is brought to you by FreedomProject Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. I'm Dr. Duke, joined by Katie Petrick. And before we get started, can you please hit that share button so we all can educate more patriots around the country? Today, we start in Houston, Texas, where a father is rightfully outraged after a teacher took his son to a drag show featuring a convicted pedophile who sexually assaulted an 8-year-old boy. Yeah, that is a lot of a mouthful. So how about this? The story takes place in Houston. This is February of 2019. We know that was a few years ago, but it's back in the news in ways that you will hear shortly. The father who is complaining is named Sadrak Tergwat. He is a roofer and a single parent. He has 2 children. This Houston father now complains that a Houston Independent School District teacher brought his son to a drag show in February 2019. He said his son was underage at the time. He would have been 16, and he didn't provide any consent from him to go. According to Father Tergwat, he also took my son to a drag show when he was underage. It was really bad. It was really a bad experience, he said. Judge for yourself on the video we have.
My son attended Sam Houston MSDC. His teacher, Mr. Patrick Pickler, he was his chemistry teacher. He was also a writer for About magazine, an LGBTQ magazine. He published an article with a lot of students, on them without authorization. He recruited my son. He also took my son to a drag show when he was underage. He also put him next to this sex offender while he was out there with my son. There's a lot of stuff that nothing got done.
Sadrak said his son had originally told him he was going to record a food contest, but unknown to dad, they went to a club. Sadrak says his son recorded these videos of his teacher driving him to the club, and in the videos you can see them enter the club through the back door. And the video shows them going behind the scenes and recording a drag show. He says all without his consent.
All right, so as you can see clearly, we have visual evidence that this 16-year-old boy was in this club and going behind the scenes. And again, it was with his chemistry teacher at the time, and he was 16 years old. And you're saying, again, why did this happen in 2019? We're just hearing about it now. Well, you see that the father spoke to the school board just now, and he was encouraged by other parents to go and actually verbalize what had happened to his son those few years ago. And the thing that should also be noted about this specific story is who the performer was at the time at the drag show. It was Albert Alfonso Garza, aka Tatiana, is it Malanina, as in like, yeah. Well, according to anyone who has the internet, you can take a look at who Albert Alfonso Garza really is, and he's that same person who is a registered sex offender who participated in a drag queen story time. So, I mean, I've been told, I don't even know how many times now, just last week, many a time, when I was told that we need drag queens at our story times because they're the good people. If you watched last week's show, you'll remember us talking about it. But I guess in this instance, they're also the bad people because they are sex offenders. And so they're sex offenders going in at the drag queen story times, and then they're the sex offenders who are the same ones performing in the drag clubs where underage students are being taken by their chemistry teachers.
Yeah, what's amazing about the story is the number of ways parental rights are being violated. Tergwat feels that the HISD didn't do anything about the incident. He recently felt encouraged by other parents to speak out, and that's what happened here. He said, quote, "We're supposed to trust our teachers," unquote. How do you trust them when this is what happens? Tergwat said his son initially told him that he was going to record a food contest, help tape it. He said he even texted with his son to check on him. He said his son told him that they were still recording and he was safe. He said his son recorded videos of his teacher driving them to the club. In the videos, you can see them enter the drag club through the back door. The video shows them going behind the scenes and recording the drag show. Turwat said that his child got home at 3 o'clock in the morning. The father said that he went to the school the next day to get answers. Quote, "Then they told me the principal was there with 2 detectives and my son. He said, they asked, 'Did you know that your son was at a drag show?' And I was like, 'No.' Turwat said HISD did nothing about the incident. The detectives did nothing about the incident, in spite of the fact that we are supposed to trust our teachers."
Well, this story goes beyond just Houston. It goes all the way to the entire state of Texas because Governor Greg Abbott got wind of how this incident had occurred. And so he actually tweeted about it. He retweeted the original video that Libs of TikTok had, where, as we just showed you, the father was speaking. And Greg Abbott said, "I am directing the Texas Education Agency to investigate this matter." So here's what you need to know, Mom and Dad. If something like this is happening, make it known. Because if it is made known, the information spreads far and wide, and it can get up to the highest echelon, I guess, in the state, and maybe something will be done about it.
And here, of course, is the obligatory HISD statement. Quote, "The viral video making the rounds on social media references an incident from 2019. Houston ISD was made aware of the allegations of teacher misconduct and launched an investigation in 2019. The teacher has not worked for HISD since April 2019. Because of laws requiring confidentiality in educator employment records, we are unable to release any further information." So, once again, hiding behind FERPA laws.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your App Store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
So I just made the comment on how if we get information, it needs to be spread far and wide, and then, it can work its way up to the upper echelon, and those in charge can actually do something about it. Because those in charge aren't going to make jokes about serious matters. Except you will if you are the Michigan Attorney General who decided, you know what, I'm going to make some crazy comments, and then I'm going to claim it to be a joke. That's what happened with Attorney General Dana Nessel, who made some crazy statements, and then she said, "Oh, I'm JK, I was just kidding," because she got blowback about it. Well, what is it that she said? She was talking clearly on the topic of drag queens, because that's all we talk about these days, especially this month. So drag queens it was. Detroit News' Greg Mauger reported that Nessel made Michigan history back in 2018 as being the first openly gay person elected to statewide office, and so naturally she was the one who was speaking at a civil rights conference in Lansing when she decided, drag queens it is. Let's listen.
No, it's not a problem for kids who are seeking a good education. Drag queens. Okay? Let me say this. Drag queens, not only are they not hurting our kids, drag queens make everything better. Drag queens are fun. Drag queens are entertainment. And you know what I'll say that was totally not poll tested? I say this. I'm drag queen for every school. That is what would be fun.
So I told you, and again in the last story, about how last week we were talking about how drag queens are amazing. And clearly this AG thinks so because, drag queens, they're like everything. They're all about it. They're entertainment. She just thinks there should be one in every school for all to enjoy.
So the blowback came by pretty quickly. Michigan GOP governor candidate Tudor Dixon tweeted out, quote, "Attorney General Dana Nessel proudly announces she is coming for our kids. When I am governor," she said, "schools will answer to local parents, not progressive activists, drag queens, and trans supremacists." I like that phrase, trans supremacist. We need to add trans privilege to that. "The days of radical activist politicians sexualizing our kids are over." And of course, we get this response fired back by Dana Nessel herself. Quote, "This is the most humorless take imaginable on a comment made in jest. I expect more from the star of Buddy Bebop versus the Living Dead. Your benefactor, Betsy DeVos, has been a greater threat to school children in Michigan than drag queens have ever been. And if you remember, about 5 minutes ago when we talked about a little boy being taken away from his family and made to go to a drag queen, I'm not sure that that's true anymore.
And it wasn't Tudor alone who made some interesting comments. We had another Michigan GOP gubernatorial candidate named Garrett Soldano who released an ad, awesome, that said, "I don't co-parent with the government. My pronouns, conservative, patriot. The woke groomer mafia wants to indoctrinate and subjugate our kids to their woke fantasies. It's time to fight back." So it's pretty interesting what's happening over there in the Mitten State. And if you're in that state, I guess let us know what you're seeing there on the ground, whether these Michigan GOP, at least the gubernatorial candidates, what they're doing and versus, the other side of the aisle where you have Dana Nessel and Gretchen Whitmer. Give us the information. What's happening?
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Well, it's a good thing that we all know that your tax dollars, at least in New York City, is paying more than $200,000 for a drag queen story hour. Just that little, that little thing when we talked about drag queen story hour. It's a small thing. It's just, some kids are going to get stories read to them by drag queens. And now we know how bad it is and how much it's costing you, taxpayer dollars. And it's only going to get worse from here because it's escalating in the amount of cost. You may be saying, okay, $200,000, pish, pish, pish. But when you take a look at the report that was just released and looking at the city records themselves, just in the month of May, most recently here, Drag Story Hour, NYC as it is called, earned $46,000. Just in 1 month, $46,000. It has overall over $200K, but just $46,000 was in the past, that 31-day month of May. They earned that from city contracts for appearances at the public schools, at street festivals, and of course at the libraries where they began. Now we have taken a look at their website, and it shows that since January, the group has organized 49 drag programs in 34 public elementary, middle, and high schools, with appearances obviously in all 5 boroughs, because it's all about equity here in New York City.
Now ask the question, it's a logical question. What does any of this have to do with education? There's not an ounce of educational value in this, and now you're paying them out of what we keep hearing from the progressive left is the depleted coffers of public education. You can find money for this garbage and you can do anything you want. Public school mom and state assembly candidate Helen Q, whose 11-year-old son attends a Manhattan middle school, said, quote, "I can't believe this. I am shocked. I would be furious if he was exposed without my consent. This is not part of the curriculum." And thank you, it's not part of the curriculum. And we know for a fact that they're not notifying any parents anywhere anymore, it seems, in this country about drag queen performances.
Except here, specifically in New York City, it's not drag queen anymore. Probably wasn't inclusive enough. So now they did change their name earlier this year to just be Drag Story Hour, because if you put queen, that has all these negative connotations, so we can't have queen anymore.
Just drag,
just for you, everyone. We do know that public libraries have been doing this since 2017, and since 2018 they've received more than $207,000 in taxpayer dollars, and the total includes the $50,000 from New York State through the Council of the Arts, along with $157,000 from the city's Department of Education, Cultural Affairs, Youth and Community Development, and even the DOT, the Department of Transportation, is getting in on this action. Now, most of the money was allocated by city council members from their discretionary budgets, so that's another thing we should be looking at, the discretionary budgets of our politicians. And they set aside just $80,000 for this specific group, the Drag Story Hour. in this fiscal year, in this current year, they set aside, here, have $80K. Go on and drag up the kids, because we're in support of that, apparently, in New York City.
And more pushback. City Council member Vicky Palladino, a Republican from Queens, said, quote, I am considering pulling funding to any school in my district that is implementing Drag Queen Story Hour. We are taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the pockets of hardworking New York taxpayers to fund a program teaching little children about their gender fluidity. Not on my watch, she insisted. Some of the examples are pretty staggering. As the drag queen Harmonica Sunbeam read books to kindergarten kids at Star Academy in Manhattan while wearing a slinky dress. One book was the Dragtivity book, which used coloring pages and encouraged students to choose their pronouns and invent their own drag names. Star Academy parents were told of it only in the drag session ahead of time, but reportedly could not opt their kids out even if they wanted to.
And since we're on the topic of money, let's just take a look. I mean, the Drag Story Hour, they want you to know, hey, you're getting a great deal. As they say, it costs us $600 to produce each of the Drag Story Hour programs, but we only charge public schools $300 per program, and we offer a limited number of free programs for schools that can't afford the fee. $600. I mean, if you're only charging $300, you got to keep getting that money, right? So let us continue to bring the free and the low-cost Drag Story Hour programs to New York City public schools. Of course, they're going to have a fundraiser. So far, they had 27 whole contributors, probably each of them, and they've raised $6,300. Because, hey, it's Pride Month. So get out there and donate your money to those Drag Story Hour folk. Anyway, back to some examples, because Dr. Duke just gave you the one about Harmonica Sunbeam, but there are plenty more, and they deserve their own little attention. We do have Bella Noche. Bella Noche wore a scanty mermaid-like bra getup to travel with second graders from Manhattan, PS 34, on a May field trip. That makes sense. And then they, of course, taught middle schoolers about all the genders and how to apply their drag eye makeup at MS 88 in Park Slope. So if you're in New York City and you know kids who go to those schools, yeah, better check in with them. And then we have one more example I would like to point out. We have a deleted photo now, because it takes a lot these days for them to actually be ashamed of what they put out, but we do have one where it's a deleted photo. We have a performer who is known as Professor Lionel Longlegs, who wore a t-shirt emblazoned with the message, I don't want to look or be cis. CIS means, you know, like cisgender means I was born a woman, I identify as a woman. Dr. Duke is a man and identifies as a man. All the terminology lingo we need to do these days. But anyway, so they got that t-shirt, and that t-shirt was being worn before an audience of primary kids in the library of PS 191 on the Upper West Side. And were parents notified this happening? Of course not.
You know, I'll say what I always say to round these out. If what you really want, we keep hearing from the public schools that they want to normalize gay men, lesbian women, and transgenders. What does any of that have to do with drag queens, who are largely men dressing as women for the performative activism behind it? Why do you need drag queens when you could actually show really gay people to them, or trans people? The answer, it's the costumes, it's the circus. Little kids wouldn't know, but they get involved in the circus-like quality of the dancing and the costumes. In other words, A1 grooming.
Yeah, all right, before we go, let's take just a little time to fill you in on some of the things that, you know, we've been chit-chatting about here. We start in Juneau, Alaska, where a dozen young children are recovering after being served floor sealant for breakfast. The incident took place at an elementary school during a summer program where children started complaining that their milk tasted kind of bad, and it was burning their throats. Turns out a staff member grabbed a jug of white floor sealant, oh, silly, believing it was milk, and then served it to the kids, who were as young as 5 years old. Poison control was notified, good, and at least one child was taken to a nearby hospital. Police say an investigation is underway. Now, speaking of stupidity, Representatives Catherine Clark of Massachusetts and Hakeem Jeffries of New York are pushing for single-use bathrooms to be added. They say Implementing single-use restrooms will make a visible difference in the lives of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals, as well as other marginalized communities. In response, Republican lawmakers slammed their Democratic colleagues for focusing on the bathroom issue while Americans endure real-world problems such as soaring inflation, rising crime, baby food shortages, a border crisis, and sky-high gas prices. Dr. Duke, what are your thoughts on this situation?
Thank you for asking. I'd like to point out that sealant, whatever else it is, has more nutrition in it than anything in Michelle Obama's lunch program for those kids, so they might want to stick with that. And as far as the bathrooms goes, the only thing Congress is producing lately is caca. So the more toilets you have, I'm all for it.
All right, well, we're going to stay in D.C., and we're going to wrap things up with one of America's worst politicians, Muriel Bowser, as the mayor recently called for American flags with 51 stars to be displayed along Pennsylvania Avenue for Flag Day on June 14th. In a tweet, she says, "This Flag Day, 51-star flags along Pennsylvania Avenue will serve as a reminder to Congress and the nation that the 700,000 tax-paying American citizens living in D.C. demand to be recognized. The Senate must do the right thing, embrace representation, and send #DC statehood to POTUS." The move comes as Bowser continues to push for Washington, D.C. to obviously become America's 51st state. Now, here's a little fun fact. Washington, D.C. has gone to Democrats in every presidential election since 1964. Due to the city's decades-long record of uninterrupted support for Democratic candidates, if D.C. were to become a state, its representatives and senators would, they're going to certainly, probably, more than likely, be Democrats as well. Duke, what are your thoughts here on making the D.C. a 51?
That's a bow-wow-wowzer idea if I ever heard one. By the way, all you got to do is what the Constitution said. Let them vote in Maryland. Let them vote in Virginia. That's not a big deal. You don't need to carve out a special exception for the tiny district of D.C. They can vote in the two states that adjoin. They're not being disenfranchised in spite of what the mayor may be trying to sell you.
Well, that's going to wrap up this segment. More to come next time.
And there we go. For all of us at Freedom Project, stay educated, my friends.